September 28th, 2020, the official release date of Genshin Impact, a day that changed the world of gacha games forever. So after 4.5 years, it must be even better now than it was in 2020, right? Right? Well, things aren't exactly looking so bright, and I'm here to talk about it. But first, let's start this video correctly. Hi, I'm Chara and I've been playing Genshin Impact since the later versions of 1.x for a total of over 1000 days. The reason I'm making this video is simple. I'm just not happy with the current state of the game and I think it's time to speak up. I will touch the topics of puzzles and exploration, Archon quests and world quests, Hangouts, endgame content, dried patches, characters and kits, resin and artifacts, quality of life updates, and missing features that would be really appreciated if they were added. This video will mainly compare all nations up to Fontaine versus Natlan, because let's be honest, something went wrong there. Firstly, let's talk about puzzles and exploration. Remember when puzzles actually made you think? Yeah, me too. Genshin used to have puzzles that required logic, observation, a bit of brain power. Take Inazuma for example. Its puzzles always had a challenge. Electrocities that zoomed by so fast that they were hard to follow, cube device puzzle that needed to be hit in the right order and the right amount of times, and electrostone puzzles where you had to align relay stones perfectly to connect the current to the accumulation stone. Even the lightning strike probes had to be positioned just right to activate. Then there's Sumeru. Invisible labyrinths, multi-layered pyramids full of complicated mechanisms, primal obelisks that required sacred seals to restore, and the withering which actively worked against you as you explored. Fontaine wasn't lacking either, with its stabilizers, harmonious reed pipes, and other unique mechanisms. Sure, Mondstadt and Liyue didn't have as many complex puzzles beyond sealies, elemental monuments, time trials, torches, and pressure plates that appear in all other nations too, but hey, they were the first two regions we had to start somewhere. But now, puzzles are either painfully easy or just another move this here, match the color, and you're done. I'm sorry to say this, but the hue monoliths in Natlan feel completely underwhelming. Apart from the Warriors challenge, I can't really remember a single puzzle in Natlan that genuinely interested me. A challenge? Who needs that, right? And before anyone says, oh, you're just complaining, you don't know what you're talking about, I do. I was there, I did that, I have every region 100% completed, so trust me, I know exactly what I'm talking about. Saurians may have been a breath of fresh air, but they definitely won't fix the issue of Natlan feeling underwhelming whatsoever. If that's still not enough evidence, let me tell you, it's not just my opinion. I ran a small poll and most responses were against Natlan. The question was simple. Which region is your favorite for exploration and which one do you like the least? With a total of 14 answers, Natlan received the most dislikes. 7 votes, so 50% of all answers. And not a single person chose it as their favorite. The second and third most disliked nations exploration-wise were Sumeru and Inazuma, with 2 votes for each. That speaks volume, doesn't it? Next, let's talk about Archon quests and world quests. Some people might disagree, but wasn't Natlan Archon quest kind of boring and unnecessarily long? Certain parts dragged on for no reason. I found myself just waiting for the characters to finish talking so I could finally get to the interesting part. I'm not a person who usually just mashes space to skip the dialogue because I quite enjoy all of the stories which Genshin portrays, but with Natlan it was just so uninteresting and so annoying to sit through characters just babbling about the same thing for another 10 minutes that I couldn't help myself and just want to skip it. The pacing was also terrible. In every previous nation, we had a solid build up before the grand reveal. Something that made sense and actually got us hyped. Think about it. Monstrat had shocking reveal of our sibling as the prince or princess of the Abyss and Signora stealing Ventis Gnosis. Liyue gave us Morax's false death and the epic battle against Oasiel, still my favorite fight in the game to this day. Inazuma had the reveal of the Mechanical A, the True Archon, and the resistance movement against the Sakoko Decree. Sumera hit us with Irminsul's secrets, the turning back of time, Nahida's fate, her regression due to exhausting her power, the reason people were unable to dream, the fall of King Deshret due to forbidden knowledge, and the intense battle with Scaramouche. Fontaine delivered the prophecy, the truth behind the counterfeit Archon, and how people of Fontaine are actually Oceanids who took human form. Then we also have Furina's and Nuvila's true identities, all executed masterfully. All of these moments were engaging and memorable. We had to actively do something to uncover the truth. But then Natlan happened. The entire story felt off. Aside from the fight with the Abyss, where we had to truly experience the war, sacrifice, pain of the nation, nothing else really hit the mark. The timing was awful. Can someone explain why they randomly threw in Traveler's dance sequence with zero build-up, only to immediately follow it up with, oh yeah, Maoika is sacrificing herself, go save her. And then Capitanos passed right after? It felt so out of place and made no sense to me. The part that was supposed to be emotional was there as an interruption to the fun time. All was served to us on a silver platter, and we didn't really have to do much thinking at all to understand the story of Natlan's Archon. Some people are comparing Natlan's story to My Little Pony and the Power of Friendship, and I can't lie, it's quite accurate, with small difference that the story writing and pacing of My Little Pony's serious episode is much better. On the other hand, world quests seem to be crafted with much more detail and care. The pacing feels smoother, making them far more enjoyable. Take Lost Traveler in the Ashen Realm, for example. It was well made, packed with exploration, and didn't feel unnecessarily stretched out or interrupted. The same goes for In the Footsteps of the Chosen of Dragons. I really enjoyed the story of our little companion, and honestly, in my maybe biased opinion, it was far better than the Natlan's Archon quest. Compared to past Archon quests, Natlan's felt rushed, poorly paced, filled with unnecessary sequences, and just didn't have the same level of polish or impact that we saw in previous nations. Next, let's talk about Hangout events. What happened to them? Why haven't we gotten a single one since 4.5, with Flinets being the last? I can't be the only one who really enjoyed them. I remember Hangouts fondly. They were a great way to interact with characters, learn more about their personalities and habits, and just spend time with them. Isn't that the perfect way to make players grow more attached to certain characters? Sure, some people may have done them just for the rewards, but they still played them. If Hangouts were brought back, I'm sure many older players would feel nostalgic and jump right into them. And before anyone says it, yes, I know Tribal Chronicles can serve as a sort of replacement, but it's just not the same. They follow a single set path with no real variation. The best part of Hangouts, in my opinion, was that the outcome changed based on the player's decisions. That level of choice and interactions is something Tribal Chronicles just don't have. You can't see how a character will react if you choose option B instead of A. You can't see if your choice makes them happy or upset. I found it quite fun in Hangouts that not only we could make characters happy, but also annoy them in some cases. In Tribal Chronicles, there is only one choice and you have to follow it. Next, let's talk about the lack of endgame content. As of May 2025, Genshin is on version 5.5, soon 5.6, and we still only have two endgame modes, Spiral Abyss and Imaginarium Theater. That's right, 4.5 years in and that's all we've got. But hey, at least there's plenty of content in those modes. right? Absolutely not. Both rotate once a month. Imaginarium Theater, introduced in 4.7 back in July 2024, almost 4 years after the game's release, meaning since 1.0 up to 4.7 there was only one endgame mode, resets on the first of every month. It has 10 acts and offers a total of 800 Primogems upon being fully completed. Meanwhile, Spiral Abyss, which was originally resetting twice a month and granting 600 Primogems per cycle, was changed in 4.7 to reset only once per month, now giving 800 Primogems. So, before 4.7 we could earn 1200 Primogems per month from Abyss. Now, with both Theater and Abyss combined, we get 1600 Primogems per month, a difference of just 2.5 additional wishes. That's barely anything. If they had kept Spiral Abyss on a 16-day reset and still introduced Theater as a monthly mode, giving us 2000 Primogems in total, players would have been much more satisfied. Or even better, why not introduce a completely new endgame mode? Honkai Star Rail, another game from the same studio, already has 4, well technically 5, endgame modes, and it's only on version 3.2. Speaking of content, another major complaint from players is that instead of expanding endgame, Hoyoverse has actually reduced it. Before 5.1, we had to complete 4 Abyss floors, from 9 to 12 each cycle. Now, if you earned 36 stars in the previous rotation, you only need to clear floors 11 and 12. While this makes things quicker, it upset a lot of players who enjoyed the challenge of clearing the full Abyss. And then there's Imaginarium Theater. While it seemed promising at first, it completely undermines Genshin's core gameplay mechanics, character synergy and elemental reactions. Instead of using well-constructed teams, you're forced into a random composition that you'd never use in a normal setting. You often have to build characters you'd never touch otherwise, only to struggle with RNG because the character you might need is not appearing in your invitations. It's frustrating, plain and simple. So I have to ask, what's the reason behind this? Do they not want players to be satisfied, or are they just doing it on purpose? Ever since the later patches of version 4.x, the number of dry patches has noticeably increased. If a patch doesn't include a map expansion, it usually has little to offer. Sure, we still get the usual amount of events, but outside of that there is nothing for older players to do. You log in, use your resin, get bad artifacts and log out. All in about 10 minutes. But what if you want to do more? Well, too bad, because there's nothing else. At this point, Genshin Impact critically lacks new content, both in terms of endgame and events. A great way to fix this would be bringing back past limited time events. This would benefit both new players who never got to experience them and older players who missed out on rewards. Plus, it would help fill the emptiness of these dry patches. What do you think? Wouldn't that be a great solution? Besides, again, Honkai Star Rail does have this feature, so why can't we have it in Genshin? Now let's talk about something I just mentioned. Bad artifacts. What does that even mean? Well, if you've ever tried to build a character properly, you already know the struggle. You pick a domain, start farming, and more often than not, you're met with disappointment. The artifacts you get aren't what you need. Resin is limited, capped at 200, which lets you run a domain 5 times with condensed resin. At worst, you will get 10 artifacts per session. Then comes the next layer of frustration, rolling them. You finally get a good piece, only for it to dump all its stats into death. Unusable. Back to farming. Again and again, day after day, same domain, same disappointment. Personally, it took me over a full year to get a complete set for Furina and Risley. I started farming when March is a Hunter domain was introduced in 4.0, originally for Linny, and I didn't finish until 5.3, over a whole year from August 2023 until January 2025. Even with the artifact strongbox and transmitter, nothing really changed. You get one artifact every 42 days from a set you need if you have enough elixirs. That's it. And even then, there is no guarantee it will roll well. Despite the two guaranteed subset rolls added in 5.5, it's just not enough. I really think this system needs a change. Maybe something like Honkai Star Rail subset reroll mechanic. At least then, players wouldn't feel like they are throwing months or even years into an endless cycle of bad luck. Next, let's talk about something which didn't sit right with me, maybe more than with others. Characters who were introduced with zero build-up, specifically Emily and Mizuki. Most new characters get at least some introduction, wherever it's through a version trailer like how Kinich, Mualani, Xilonen and Chaska were revealed in 5.0, or through a small in-game appearance before their banner. There's usually something. But with Emily and Mizuki, nothing. They were just dropped into the game with no prior information outside of leaks, or maybe some voice line from a character. For Emily, one of the biggest letdowns for players was her drastic design change before release. Early leaks showed a completely different look, and when the final version was revealed, a lot of people were disappointed. Then there's Mizuki, who was thrown onto the standard banner, but many players aren't exactly happy with her, particularly because of her playstyle and kit. At first glance, you'd expect her to work well with Yilan or Xinkyu, right? Well, wrong. She's yet another high investment character who requires top tier supports like Furina or Mawika to deal any significant damage. And her kit? It's not what you expect. If Mizuki needs characters who place turrets in order to work well, does she actually buff the turrets in return? No. In her own team she does the least amount of damage. I was personally hoping her abilities would count as normal attacks, so she could fit well into a taser team with, for example, Yelan. But guess what? That's not how she works. To make things worse, let's talk about her signature weapon. Usually, a character's signature weapon is their best in slot, but not for Mizuki. Not first, not second, not even third, is her fifth best option, with 3 4-stars ranking above it. That says a lot, doesn't it? At this point, it really feels like the devs have stopped being creative with character kits. Instead, they are designing them in a way that forces you to pull multiple other characters just to make the one you actually want to be playable. Now, let's talk about Natlan as a whole. The problem with characters, designs, and everything else. We already talked about exploration and puzzles before, now it's time for the rest. The issue with Natlan isn't just the characters themselves, it's the overall design and lack of consistency. The land of Natlan is styled as primitive, full of tribes, rugged villages, and natural, untamed landscapes. You'd expect the characters to match that world, to feel connected to the environment and culture they come from, but instead we get characters like Kinich, whose pixelated attacks look ripped straight out of a 8-bit video game, Xilonen, who's a DJ, Chaska riding and flying around on a huge gun, and Mawika casually riding around on a motorcycle like it's a modern cityscape. It doesn't fit at all. This isn't like Fontaine, where the steampunk mechanical aesthetic was deeply rooted in the nation's identity. Fontaine was all about innovation and industry. It was said that it's the most advanced nation amongst all. Then why do we have a motorcycle and a DJ and a 8-bit video game character in Natlan? In Fontaine, it just fits. So when you see a character like Risley using mechanical gauntlets or running into a robotic guard and enemies, it just makes sense. It feels natural, like an extension of the world's lore and history. Natlan though, Natlan feels like a mashup of random ideas, primitive tribes in the environment, but characters look like they are from a futuristic tech festival. There is no cohesion. It's like the developers couldn't decide wherever they wanted Natlan to feel ancient and connected to its roots, or modern and flashy, so they just threw everything together without thinking it through. And that's what makes it so frustrating. The Aztec culture that they supposedly drew inspiration from is rich, layered, and could have created an incredibly immersive world. But instead, Natlan ends up feeling shallow and disconnected, a missed opportunity on every level. Another huge problem is the lack of real quality of life updates. Players have been asking for basic improvements for years, and we still don't have them. Meanwhile, Honkai Star Rail, made by the same company, already implemented many of these features with no issue. People have been begging for things like being able to buy old 4-star event weapons if you miss them, an automatic resin overflow system so you don't lose it if you're busy or away for a few days, increasing the resin cap to at least 240 instead of the outdated 200, especially now that there's way more things to farm for, way more diverse artifacts, way more boss drops that you need. 200 a day is just not enough. A dialogue skip button. Something so basic but somehow still missing in Genshin, even though Star Rail has it. Artifact loadouts, like in Honkai Impact 3rd, where you can just save different builds for characters instead of manually switching all pieces every time. Being able to climb the same boss 3 times, or at least increase the number of boss drops per week to make farming less of a slog. A system to convert boss drops into others. If you need a drop from a different boss, you could just exchange it instead of wasting resin. Climb commissions directly from the menu instead of having to teleport to Catherine every time. Optimization for banners, because let's be real, the new Chronicles banner hardly fixes anything. It just adds a few reruns without addressing the real problem of missing older characters, permanent events, or bringing back old events that are locked away forever, both for new players and veterans who missed out. And last but not least, no more day-gated domains. It's ridiculous that in 2025 we still have to wait for the right day to farm certain weapon materials. All of these features have been heavily requested for years. They've been proven to work in other games. There is no excuse at this point. The fact that they exist in Star Rail but not in Genshin just shows how little attention the devs are giving to Genshin's long-term players. At this point, it honestly feels like they expect people to just deal with it, but many are starting to realize that they don't have to. They realize that they have a choice: leave and go to a game where they are appreciated more, or stay in a game where they feel bored, stuck in a loop with a fandom which treats any, even constructive criticism, as complaining. Some players really need to open their eyes and see that biting your tongue isn't the way if you need change. You have to speak up, you have to talk about it, you have to say that you want something, not stay quiet, maybe one day they will change. No, it doesn't work that way. If you want something to improve, you have to voice it. Leaving your opinions in the comments is much appreciated. I'd like to know if my way of thinking is wrong and maybe I should change it, or maybe there are people who think the same and would like to also point out other things that I didn't include in my video.